Welcome to OnPodcast, the On Microsoft podcast, where we talk about Microsoft stuff on a podcast. Today, we're joined by an awesome guest who's got his own channel, and he's going to be talking about all kinds of Windows stuff. Probably mostly about himself, but about the channel, and we're going to try to dig into some old Windows history because he is a cornucopia of that kind of stuff. So, without further ado, we would like you guys to welcome our guest.
Yeah, so as Kareem said, we have Hugh here from Windows on Windows, and Hugh is quite popular in the Windows community. Everyone knows who this guy is because he does a lot of awesome videos over on his YouTube channel about the history of Windows and all those fun, quirky facts that people look for. If you want to know about Windows, Hugh knows about it, and his channel is quite popular. He has over about 10,000 subscribers, I believe. He hit the 10,000 mark the other week. So
We did.
congrats to
Yeah,
him on that.
congratulations.
I've been a long time follower, and I'm so glad that we finally have him here on the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, you could see
Thank
through his
you.
background too that he's a huge Windows fan.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. And yeah, we passed 10,000 recently, which is like when I started the channel, I would never have imagined that that many people were that interested in Windows. But clearly, I mean, that's good, right? Clearly, it's not just me. Windows is massive, especially like the development and the history is really fascinating. So yeah, it's awesome.
And all that said, our first question, we always like to ask our guests about their personal story and how they get to where they got to they are today. And everyone knows you as Windows on Windows and Hugh, but could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your story and how you became a Windows fan?
I can. So the YouTube channel I started about 10 years ago, and and it wasn't until very recently, so I mean earlier on this year, that I actually sort of let people know about me. It was all just about Windows, and I mean, for example, I've only shown my face in videos since this summer. So before that, it was just my voice, and so people didn't know what I look like. I never gave my name out anywhere. So it's only very recently that I've kind of started opening up. So usually I'm quite private in my personal life, so I like to keep certain things to myself. But yeah. So anyway, my name is Hugh. When I started the channel, I was using my username, which was Major Sky 17. So a lot of people will still call me Major Sky 17 or know me as that. Especially people that have been following the channel for a long time. Then in about 2014, I rebranded the whole channel to Windows on Windows. So now people that have been watching since then will probably know me as Windows on Windows. I've really not made this easy for myself. And then very recently, in the last few months, then I've gone into my actual name. So yeah, my name is Hugh. So it's an English name, but I spell it maybe a little bit strangely because it's a Welsh spelling because I'm from Wales. So I spell it Huw, but it's just the same as Hugh that people will probably be more familiar with. So yeah, I'm originally from Wales, which is a country in the UK. I live in England at the moment, which is obviously probably the most famous part of the UK. Um, I was, I'm 31. I was born in 1990. So I mean, my childhood consisted of Windows 98 Second Edition mainly, which we had on our first computer, and I broke it like a lot. Like, we used X, but it was so easy to break, so I broke it all the time. And obviously, my parents hated me for that, but it was really to like mess around with Windows.
So
So I,
is breaking things the reason why you're so into Windows? Because that's how I learned about Windows so much. I took my family PC and I played around with it until I learned what is the start menu, what is the taskbar, what does command prompt do. So are you one of those tinkerers who just played with computers until you found your way around, like self-taught per se?
definitely self-taught, yeah. So I mean, apart from doing, I did some computing as part of my schoolwork,
Right.
but that's more things like like using Microsoft Office, or using Excel, using Word, making PowerPoints and stuff. But the actual tinkering in Windows, yes, that's all basically self-taught. And I mean, like you said, yeah, you can learn so much from breaking stuff, like
Yeah.
especially technology. So yeah, I think I learned a lot just from messing around, like going into the Windows folder and seeing like what is this thing? What happens if I delete this? And yeah, well, as you can probably imagine, I was like my parents were not happy about this at all. So yeah, definitely had to like reinstall Windows a good few times.
So your Windows on Windows, what is your favorite Windows version? We also ask everyone that who appears on our show, what is your favorite Windows version and what is your favorite Microsoft product?
I'm gonna guess Windows 8.
Yeah.
Favorite Windows version? That's a common question, but actually, favorite Microsoft product? That's a good question. So I'm assuming you mean apart from Windows, not including Windows.
Yeah. We could see your shelf in the background. You have a lot of awesome Microsoft stuff there. You have a Windows
Yeah.
Windows ME box or Bill Gates book
Yeah,
there.
so again, this is all stuff that's kind of transpired only in the last few months. So from when I've been showing my face on webcam on streams and stuff, yeah, I've got a few things just to put in the background to make it look a bit more cute. So yeah, I've got a Windows 98 box. These are all things that they're not original ones that I owned. They're just ones that I bought online. So yeah, Windows 98. Got Windows 3 as well, which I haven't actually opened yet. I'm still I'm aiming to do an unboxing video on that. I've got some books that people recommended to me, like about Bill Gates and history of Microsoft, and there's one that goes into detail about Windows 1 and how that came about. So yeah, it's fascinating. I've actually forgotten what you asked me. What did you ask me? Sorry. What was my favorite Windows? That's right.
Your favorite Windows and your favorite Microsoft product.
Yeah.
Two questions.
Yeah. So favorite Windows, really common question on the channel. I would say I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit. There's two. So Windows 98 SE, just because that was the first version that I had on my first computer at home. So that's the one that is like really nostalgic for me. That's my childhood one. And like I said, broke loads of times. Really enjoyed using. And then I think Windows 7, just because I think for me personally, that was like the pinnacle of Windows. That's probably a controversial opinion, but I think after Windows 7, like obviously with the whole Windows 8 was a complete like overhaul on this, wasn't it? It was so drastically different to anything that had been in, Windows had been like before. And I think after that, Microsoft haven't really managed to get quite back, I don't think, to Windows 7 standard of Windows. That might be a controversial opinion, but I'm not sure.
So, I think a lot of people agree with you, actually.
So I've got two favorites. So Windows 7, I mean, I was still using Windows 7 until maybe literally a couple of years ago. And I mean, I had used Windows 10 when it first came out, but I think after a few years of using Windows 10, I kind of got a little bit, I don't know, just a bit fed up. It seemed to be not really progressing very much. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, obviously, it was a bit weird because we were used to having new versions of Windows every 2 or 3 years, right, up until then. So we were used to having like new user interfaces, new features. With Windows 10, it felt like, to me, it was just getting a little bit stale because obviously it was the same user interface, same, it was the same operating system essentially for 6 years. So yeah. Anyway, look, I'm digressing again. I literally, me talking about Windows, I will not stop. So yeah, sorry, I might go off topic. So coming back to your actual question, favorite Microsoft product? Okay, apart from Windows, I think, and I've thought about this a lot, but no one's ever asked me. I think it would be Microsoft Office, but specifically Microsoft Office 97, because again, to me, that's really nostalgic. So that's the version we had on our Windows 98 PC. And obviously, with old versions of Office, you get the Office assistants that I know, like, kind of the
Clippy. Everyone loves Clippy.
yeah, they're still popular, aren't they? Like, but even like kids now that would never have used the Office assistants, they like know, like they're in their psyche, aren't they? Like they're like so popular. One of those retro things that everyone loves, like Clippy. Yeah. So, I mean, my favorite was always the dot. I don't know about you. It was the dot that I liked to use.
That would just hide in and out of documents.
Yeah. So.
Well, it's weird because sometimes a joke will last long enough for it to be cool again. So you get I'm just saying, you get like people who made fun of the dog, who hated it, who same thing for Clippy, and now you're getting a renaissance where it's like it comes back around to where it's kind of, people will buy sweaters and things like that with it on it. So it went through its life cycle.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? It's just a niche thing that has just come back. And obviously, Clippy is now an emoji in Windows 11.
Yeah.
And in Teams as well. Yeah, he's all over the place now.
No, I love it.
He may be more popular than Cortana, which was short-lived, so to speak, relatively speaking. I kind of want to ask you I know we have some other questions, but I kind of want to go back to when you were saying that Windows 10 kind of felt stale for a little bit. Would you be in favor of Microsoft going back to the 2-3 year refresh cycle where they could I don't know, maybe do a smaller beta for insiders and stuff, but have the big numbered release with marketing behind it?
I mean, personally, I think so. I think I would prefer that. But I mean, there's probably again like an element of nostalgia because I'm so used to that being the way that it's always worked. I mean, for example, late 90s, I mean, Windows versions were coming quite quickly, weren't they? You had 98, and then you had 98 SE the year after. Then it was, Windows 2000, Windows ME, Windows XP, all of those versions of Windows came out within 2-3 years of each other. But since around Vista, it's been every 3 years, right? So yeah, I mean, I think there's an element of nostalgia. And I think we're going to talk about this later, the Windows Insider program, it kind of ties into, because I think with the Insider program, that's great because I think it's great, it gives people the chance that are fans of Windows to actually be involved in its development and to influence how it's being developed. But I think there's a trade-off, isn't there? Because with the Insider program, you have lots of people giving lots of feedback. And I wonder whether maybe that means that Microsoft themselves are doing less testing internally. So it seems like that there's been a few kind of controversial Windows 10 updates, haven't there? Like that have been deleting people's files and other things going on. So it makes me wonder whether maybe, I think before they switched this idea of Windows as a service, when it was a big release every 2-3 years, I think maybe I feel that was better just because I'd imagine Microsoft themselves were doing more internal testing. So it felt like when you actually got the big release, it was more rounded, like it was more tested, more complete. There were, less big problems. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no. And like you said, we'll circle back around this, but we just want to kind of get some of these other more, get to know you kind of questions out of the way first. And I think the next one is, what's your background, if you don't mind sharing?
Okay, yeah. So background. I mean, I'm not sure what. So like I said, I'm from Wales. I mean, I just did upbringing, qualifications. I was always really interested in science. So then, when I went to uni, I studied physics, which was, I mean, that was so hard. I mean, you can probably imagine it was really hard. And I wasn't one of those people that was like naturally really good at physics and maths. I had to, I really had to concentrate and, teach myself a lot. Some people that were doing my degree at uni were really good at it just naturally, but I had to work so hard. So yeah, it was really hard. But I was interested, so I think that carried me through. And I had lots of very intelligent friends as well that really helped me with, getting through physics. So got my physics degree. Then I went into, I always knew since I was a child that I wanted to be a teacher, so then I went into teaching. So I've had quite a simple upbringing, really. I just went, like I said, straight to school, straight to university. I didn't even have a job until I started teaching, like not even a part-time job. So it was just really simple, really. So yeah, I started teaching in 2011, and I've been doing that ever since. It's the only job, basically.
Do you always teach with your Windows 98 shirt on?
That is a great question. I don't. I actually, so this comes back to what I was saying earlier about being kind of private. I keep the whole YouTube channel thing separate. So I don't think anyone that I teach knows about my YouTube channel unless they're as interested in Windows as we are. They might just go and find it. But yeah, it's never come up in conversation. I don't wear the Windows shirt. This is exclusively for streams and podcasts for the channel. So yeah.
You have to be like Michael MJD and never ever show your face and be anonymous the whole time.
I thought about it. Like, I think that's what I was going for, for most of the history of the channel. Because, I don't know, privacy is a big thing, isn't it? And you worry about what might happen if you show your face. But then I was just kind of thinking, what's the worst someone could do? Maybe, like, make a really horrible meme about me. But then why? Because I'm not that popular anyway. It's not like, I've not got millions of followers. But, yeah.
Well, I mean, just like we said about 5 minutes ago, it'll come back around. So, like, in 10 years, you'll be on a shirt somewhere. People will be like, I got this shirt at Hot Topic, and I love this guy.
Yeah, which would be fine.
Yeah, like Bob Ross.
Yeah, as long as it was a nice shirt, I'm okay with that.
But that said, can we get into the fun stuff, which is these unreleased versions of Windows? I know this was something that my co-host Kareem wanted to ask about, and he wanted to know, can you cover the unreleased Neptune and how it eventually shaped the Windows 8?
Now, I know you did. I know you did a whole video on it,
Yeah.
so we'll tell our audience, don't leave this podcast just yet. But when it's over, go watch his video because it's super enlightening. I would like to hear from you, and maybe a shortened version for everyone who's listening.
Yeah, of course. actually. The Neptune video, that was one of the first videos I did. So I mean, the first videos I did, I'm not a fan of. I think it took me quite a long time, I think, to refine the art of doing the videos. I think at the beginning I wasn't really taking it very seriously. So yeah, the Neptune video, I mean, it's great, but I think it's a little bit too long. It could do a bit tighten up. So I might come back to that in the future. But yes, in a nutshell, Windows codename Neptune. It's a really famous unreleased version of Windows. So it was being worked on in the late 90s. It was originally meant to be essentially the first home version of Windows NT. So Windows NT was this, at the time, fairly new branch of Windows that Microsoft had been working on it like since the early 90s. And the whole idea was that it was meant to be more portable, more secure, more stable than the old original DOS-based versions of Windows. So the first release of NT was 3.1 in the early 90s, then we had 3.5, 3.51, Windows NT 4. Windows 2000 was Windows NT 5, and then this next release was meant to be Neptune. So Neptune's version number when it was in development was NT 5.5, which is kind of interesting because Neptune got cancelled for reasons that we're not really aware of, but it was essentially then replaced with Windows XP, which has a kernel version of 5.1. So it's kind of weird because if you, for example, install Neptune and then you put an XP CD in the drive, you can't upgrade to XP because XP has technically a lower version number than Neptune. So even though it's a data release, it won't let you upgrade because the version numbers are all over the place. So like I said, with Neptune, the aim was for it to be the first version of Windows NT that was going to be marketed towards home users. So before this, NT had been marketed exclusively at businesses, and home users were just being marketed Windows 9X at the time, right? So Windows 98, 98 SE, and then ME after that, which was the last version of 9X. So yeah, Neptune is really fascinating, mainly because obviously it never got finished. It was cancelled. We don't know exactly how far in development it got, but it seems to have been cancelled quite early on. There's only one build of Neptune, so this is like a development kind of snapshot of Neptune that's ever been made available online, which is build 5111. And yet, even in that one build, it's got so many fascinating things in, things that were there even in the late 90s that we've then not even seen officially in a released version of Windows for a long time after that. So I'll give you a few examples. Neptune is the earliest version of Windows that we know of, that had the welcome screen. So in Windows XP, where you have the blue welcome screen, that came from Neptune. Neptune was the first version that had an integrated Windows firewall, which again came later in XP. It was the first version of Windows that had what Microsoft were calling a fast startup option. So this was kind of like Hibernate, but it would be turned on by default. So if you had an NTFS formatted disk, turn on this fast startup option. That actually came with Windows 8, which was over a decade later. So I mean, that's just, to me, fascinating that it took that them to actually come back to that idea. Neptune, probably the most famous thing in Neptune that you'll see online is something called the Start page on the activity centers. So the Start page, again, the earliest we think it has been in Windows is Neptune, but it has turned up in some beta versions of Windows ME and Windows XP as well a bit later. But again, it never got to the final releases. So again, this is still never officially made release version of Windows, unless you might class the Start screen in Windows 8 as the same thing. But essentially, this was kind of a desktop replacement. So it was HTML based, and the idea was that it would give home users quick access to everything that they need on their computer, basically, without them having to go into Explorer, go into folders. So you had quick links to things like Internet Explorer, which is obviously the browser that everyone wanted to use in the 90s. Internet Explorer, Express, email, quick links to documents, pictures. And like I said, the idea was to just simplify the user interface for home users. So, like I said, Windows 8, the Start screen in Windows 8, to me, I think that is the same thing. Right? I think the intentions were slightly different in that obviously it was partly meant to be optimized for touch use, like tablet devices, but I think the idea is the same. It was meant to be a desktop replacement that would give you a very easy, quick way to get to your most used programs or folders, or you could customize it however you wanted. So yeah, the Start page, That would eventually become the start screen in Windows 8. And again, that's over a decade later. And then the activity centers finally, sorry, I know it's just so fascinating.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
The activity centers, this is a whole own thing as well. So these have never made a released version of Windows, but essentially this was kind of tied into the start page. So for example, on the start page, there might be a link to say music. So you'd click music and then you just get this little window and it would just have everything in it that was to do with music. So it would have, for example, access to your music files on your hard disk. It would give you access to play the files. You'd be able to burn music on the CD if you had one in the drive. So it's like a task-centered operation. That's how it's usually described, right? So it's like a little hub, a bit like Windows Media Center, I guess, a little hub specifically for that one type of media, and everything that you could possibly want to do with music, for example, would be in that activity center. So again, just literally, again, trying to make Windows as easy as possible for home users. Essentially, that was the whole idea.
I would love to see that revived and kind of modernized the same way that they do that hub for Office now.
Yeah, I mean,
if they were to do stuff like that.
Yeah, and I just, like I said, I find it fascinating because there are so many examples of all of these ideas that Microsoft have had in the past that have taken, in some cases, like I said, like decades or more to actually appear in Windows. But the idea has been there for, amount of time. It's just fascinating.
It's crazy.
It is, yeah. Start screen, literally, you could trace that back to the late 90s, if not before that. So, yeah, it's just...
And we're still seeing versions of it where you can do full screen start. Not so much in 11 just yet, but I'm sure we'll work our way with more features coming into 11 that allow us to do something similar to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Our next question. How was the development process from Windows 8 to Windows 10? Like, I know that you talk about this as well, just kind of, seeing Sanofsky's, super secretive, I want to be Steve Jobs-esque kind of hold on all of the released information about it and the build and things like that, to, kind of what we saw with Terry Myerson who was like, test it for us because cutting back our staff and we need millions of actual testers and things like that. So what was your opinion on the development process?
So do you want me to go over what the process was, or do you want me to?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely.
So Windows 8 to start with. So this came out in 2012, in case people are aware, and I'm sure people will be aware that it was not well received at all.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's putting it nicely.
Yeah, so Steve Ballmer was in charge of Microsoft at the time, so he was overseeing. This was his little baby, I guess. And I think, to be honest, it was a very daring thing to do because it was changing the core of the Windows user interface, wasn't it? Like, it was just literally almost throwing out everything people had expected from Windows and completely changing it. So yeah, it wasn't well received, difficult for especially keyboard and mouse users because it was very touch optimized. So Microsoft were kind of hedging their bets that tablet devices would be the way forward. At that point in time, around 2012, desktop market share was decreasing basically, and tablets were looking like they were going to be the next big thing. Obviously, that's not really where we're at now. But that was, where we were at the time. So yeah, not well received. So Microsoft then pushed this update that they called Windows 8.1, which in itself is interesting just for the naming strategy, because that, to me, that was like a throwback to Windows 3.1.
Yeah.
But so unusual at the time because since 3.1, no Windows version had been named in that way. There was no 0.1 for
Well, there was
years.
never really a need to apologize for the previous releases.
You're probably right. Yeah. So yeah, then we got 8.1 about a year later, and to me, this was Microsoft saying basically, we're sorry, I think we went a little bit too far. And then they started backtracking on, some of the big changes. So 8.1, for example, restored the start button, which was famously removed in Windows 8. Then we got the update 1 for Windows 8.1. Isn't Microsoft naming great? It just makes so much sense. Update 1.
The worst team.
Yeah, so then that brought back window title bars for keyboard and mouse users. It brought back the ability to boot straight to the desktop rather than going to the start screen. It brought back power options on the start screen. right-click context menus on the start screen. So there were all these little things that they'd completely taken out to start with, and then it's kind of like, well, actually, we'll put these back in because people obviously don't like where we're going with this. So I think then Windows 10. It was good, like you said. I think good in a way that they were much more open about the development. So obviously, with the insider program starting around that time, they were deliberately involving people that were interested in Windows development to obviously get their ideas, get their feedback. So I think that was actually a good thing to do at that time, because I think it kind of helped restore a bit of trust in Microsoft and what they were doing. Like it felt like they were actually going to listen to what people wanted from Windows, rather than just like with Windows 8, literally throwing loads of things out the window and just giving people a start screen and saying, well, there you go, you don't get a start screen. So yeah, I like that aspect. And I mean, Windows 10, I think that was just carrying on with what 8.1 had started doing, which was kind of undoing some of the really controversial changes. So in 10, for example, we did get back the ability to just by default go straight to the desktop, which is what people had expected for decades from Windows. You didn't have to go straight to the start screen. The start menu by default wasn't a full screen UI anymore. It was back to a little start menu, much more like in Windows 7. So I think for the majority of Windows users, that was clearly it was much better received. It was much more like Windows 7. In that it was what people expected from a desktop operating system.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, it's I think that'll be one of, I mean, aside from the stuff that you report about that becomes kind of ghost development, where like you see something that was put in code 20 years ago for random reasons, and then we hear a story about like, oh, this developer did it before this reason. I think Windows 8 development will be one of the more modern test cases for what could really go wrong with the company trying to do something drastic, and what could go right, or how they steer the ship without like crashing into the iceberg. Essentially, like they managed to, for all intents and purposes, save Windows, because 8 was really a downtime, a solid 5 years where the company was kind of flailing to find itself.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I mean, me personally, I think Windows 7 was still the pinnacle in usability. It was simple. There were no gimmicks. It wasn't trying to be 3 different operating systems, 3 different types of devices all at once. Just a desktop on it. Did what it needed. Loved it for that. So I think simplicity is the best way to go. I think.
I personally blame Windows 8's failures, aside from really bad marketing, bad timing, and some other actual UI issues.
And the
Mostly,
iPad as well.
well, not even the iPad. I think because the iPad, I would argue that the iPad encouraged them, kind of brought them in that direction for touch. It was Intel not being able to produce chips that could give them hardware to put this stuff on. Like, if you were to get, even think about it now, like the Surface that it showed up on was like the size of this, like, I don't have it, but it's super thick. It was like a tablet this big, 10 inches, and nobody's going to want to carry that thing the same way they do with an iPad. So they're not going to interact with it constantly the same way they do with an iPad. So without Intel being able to produce hardware or help Microsoft produce hardware or the industry produce hardware for tablet-specific things, they couldn't really lean into it. Like 8.1 could have been, okay, we're going to refine the touch interface even more. Like, we know you guys don't like it right now, but we're going to keep at it to where it actually makes sense. And in like 4 or 5 years, that's all you guys are going to know. Like, you're not going to, you won't know anything else. You'll say like, oh, the desktop was an antiquated, user interface. I'm used to using my phone and the tablet by extension. But instead, they had to kind of backtrack because the hardware wasn't there. Like, everything was too clunky, too heavy on the Windows side, and Apple just happened to have that right balance of, I can hold it in my hand, so I'm going to use my hands.
I mean, it's really interesting because obviously we don't know what could have happened, but it would have had gone if, for example, maybe this is what I always say when people ask me about this. What do you think Microsoft could have done differently about it to have made it more successful? I think there are a couple of main things. Firstly, I think people needed to have the option to use the old interface in some way. So just like when 95 came out, when you set up 95 for the first time, you're literally given the option to use the Windows 3.1 Program Manager if you prefer.
Yeah.
So users had a choice from the beginning. I think if they did that with Windows 8, it would have been less of a, what's the word, like less of a forced, like it wouldn't be forcing people necessarily to adapt this whole new UI, and I think people would have been more forgiving about it if they'd had the choice. So people that liked the start screen and the whole Metro thing could have obviously used that fine, no problem. People that preferred the old Windows, they could have used that interface as well, and they could have maybe used Windows 8 as like a stepping stone to like maybe in the next version, then bring in a bit more of the touch friendly stuff. Maybe.
Yeah, there's so many what ifs, and we'll have to have you back on so we can relitigate this whole Windows 8 thing. But do you want to ask the next question, Eric?
Yeah, we talked a lot about products that Microsoft never came to be. And one thing that came to be and then also never came to be is Windows 10X. So what are your thoughts on the shift from dual screen PCs and Windows 10X to what we now know today as Windows 11?
Yeah, well, again, this is interesting because there's kind of this is the same sort of situation again, isn't it? So Windows 8, that was all about Microsoft hedging their bets that touch input was going to be the next big thing, and pushing out this big, massive update to Windows to try and accommodate that and get on the bandwagon. It was a similar thing that they did here, I think, wasn't it, with 10X? So that was the idea that dual screen PCs were going to be the next big thing, and again they wanted to hedge their bets on this being the next way that people were going to be interacting with their computers, and obviously that's not what's happened. Probably partly because of the pandemic, which has kind of forced it using their desktops, isn't it? But yeah, so I mean, I like the idea of dual screen PCs, but again, I just think, like I said earlier, people prefer simplicity. Like with Windows 7, it just did what people wanted, and they didn't expect any more. They didn't want any more. They didn't want any gimmicks or anything. So dual screen PCs, to me, like for someone like me that's interested in tech, it would be interesting just for the concept to see what you could do with it. But I think for the majority of people, they would rather just have a laptop, or rather have a desktop with with a keyboard and mouse, like normal. So 10X, I mean, we could talk about this all day, couldn't we? 10X. 10X, that was maybe about the fifth time maybe that Microsoft were trying to make like this light version of Windows that was going to be, better to run on lower end hardware and, for regular users that weren't necessarily power users. But it never works. I don't know why.
No, I'm always interested in trying to figure out why they won't simply just make a Linux version with the UI from Windows. I think they may be partly lazy and having to try and explain to users the legacy aspects of like, hey, your drivers won't work with this, your printers won't work with this. If this is cloud only, if they can find a marketing team that could explain that, then I think, they are Linux friendly. You just take a Linux distro and you Windows it up, and you get that light version that you want.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you're right. I think if you're going to call something Windows, people have certain expectations, don't they? So they expect their hardware to work. They will expect to be able to run any app they want and not have to worry about whether it's a Win32 app or UWP app. So if you're going to call it Windows, it needs to be Windows as it is now. Capabilities.
Well, I guess, then the alternate solution is to spin up a company, small one, don't tell anybody about it, and just infiltrate the Linux crowd with this. Be like, hey, here's a new version. We're putting it on server. We're putting it on servers. We're letting people use in the cloud, and people are like, oh, I really love this version. And you say, hey, Microsoft created this company 7 years ago, and everyone who's using Linux to run businesses and stuff like that are using this operating system. And eventually, you can bring it back over that way.
Yeah, I mean, again, it would be interesting. This is something that I thought about. So, what if Microsoft did come up with a new operating system that wasn't called Windows, that was completely different, that was, effectively what 10X was trying to do, like this light operating system? That would be super interesting to see, whether that could work.
I mean, they have the money, and if you're going to throw the kind of R&D and money behind a Surface Duo, why not try what I would assume would be a less expensive, effort to do just Linux and have it be your new spinoff, years later. Like, this isn't going to be something that earns you money immediately. You're not going to license it. This is something you work on, like you said when they do what was it when they started building the seeds for Neptune. I'm like,
Yeah.
we saw that in Windows 8 15 years later, something like that. So if you have that kind of longevity, start working on it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you mentioned the Duo. I mean, I love this idea as well. I mean, the Duo, I pre-ordered the original one, and I used it for, I think, maybe a few months, and I loved it. But I think the big thing with the Duo wasn't the dual screen thing, because I loved that. That's so useful, especially like if you're one of these people that works, where you're not at home, having two screens. It's effectively like an unfolding tablet. It was great, but for me, it was the camera. Like I was using it as my mobile phone, but the camera was, I mean, in the original Duo, it was really bad. So that was the big thing for me. The Duo 2 I haven't pre-ordered, but it looks like they've actually really improved the cameras. So again, that'll be interesting to see how successful that is, because that's not too far removed, is it? I mean, that is a dual screen PC, essentially. Yeah. It's just a small one running Android.
I think the speculation is that at some point, the reason why they're sticking with this is that they want to throw Windows on it down the road.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, which is what a lot of us wanted from the beginning. Yeah.
So maybe this connects revived later.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a Windows Phone fan. So I mean, I was still using my Windows 10 mobile, my Lumia, until 2019. Like I think it was when WhatsApp dropped support, I had to stop using it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this whole idea of having, like, I don't think it was ever meant to be Windows 10 mobile, but it was meant to be, again, like a light version of Windows, wasn't it? That would run on this dual screen mobile. It was fascinating. But yeah, obviously then they went Android, which, again, there are pros and cons, aren't there? Personally, being a Windows fan, I didn't like that. But I understand why they did that.
Well, it's interesting because you got to think about the gulf between usability between the screen sizes. You say you have a tablet at 10 inches or whatever. There are certain limitations to that. You're not going to be taking your tablet to go pay for something at the grocery store. But when you have something smaller, you expect those certain apps to come with you. So until Windows can, or Microsoft can, and Google can push everyone to PWAs, where that same app will travel with you, and it's devoid of the Play Store or Apple Store, then it's going to be really hard for Microsoft to say, like, oh, we built you a portable thing that you can take with you, but you can't use it in all the same scenarios that you would any other portable device.
Yeah, exactly. And that was always the problem with Windows 10 Mobile, wasn't it?
Yeah, so much so.
And something that links all of this together is the Windows Insider program. So what are your thoughts on the whole Windows Insider program and giving the public early access to these well, you can't say secret anymore, but I'll still say it's secret version of Windows.
Yeah, I mean, it was always more fun back in the day, right, when they were secret, and then they'd leak online, and then everyone would be downloading it, like, oh yeah, look at this, look at this, look at this. Yeah, now
and that's what happened with Windows 11. It leaked online two weeks before, and then everyone knew what to expect.
Right, I forgot. How did I forget about that? Yeah, you're right, it did, and then that was fascinating. Yeah, so I mean, like I said earlier, I like the idea that obviously they are involving people, Windows fans like us, in actually influencing potentially how it's being developed, but it's the quality control. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how this works, but it just seems since Windows 10, I think the quality of updates, to me anyway, seems to be lower than in the past. Like there's been a lot of big user problems with updates, haven't there? Like deleting files and other things going on. So it just makes me wonder whether, I think Corey mentioned this earlier, whether they're substituting actual internal testing for insiders testing it instead, which is not quite the same, is it? I think you need to have an element of testing it internally as well.
Well, so, I think that's always been my, put my tinfoil hat on. My conspiracy theory is that in order to speed up the process, because I think there were betas for Windows 8. So, this isn't a new concept, so to speak, but they would shut them down for like 2 or 3 months before the release so they could polish everything up. That was the idea. And I don't think, this constant iteration of, release, then big release, you don't get that same thing. And I don't think they have the teams in place anymore. They're trying to be agile, keep up with Chrome development, keep up with Mac development, keep up with Linux development. They're keeping these teams small, and they're outsourcing all of the telemetry that they need to get. They would have to use mathematics and a bunch of other kind of things to kind of put together internally what they could work on, and they would limit that. They would lock it down and say, okay, this is the only ways, these are the only types of configurations. We're not going to be allowing all of these insiders to give us input. Like, if you can't fit within these boxes, then you can't get this operating system. Like, and that kind of led to more secure things. People knew in 3 or 4 years they were going to get a new operating system that was only configured to these set of devices at this specific time. And they would talk with manufacturers. Now it's like Lenovo's got to figure out what the hell they're going to do for like Windows 21H1 and Windows 11 and their driver support and all of this stuff, because it's all just kind of just rolling all at the same time. And again, like I said, my conspiracy theory is that they just said, cut the staff for testing. We'll only keep the top engineers who can execute code at a specific time, and we'll give them promotions based on that. And we'll let all of our insiders just give us the feedback, like, okay, what's broken? And we'll triage that based on like, hey, does it break your system? Okay, move on. Even though just because it doesn't break your system doesn't mean that it has, it isn't big enough to ruin something else.
Yeah, I agree. I think again, I think it worked better when it was a big release every couple of years. I mean, it wasn't that simple. I mean, we got a big release every couple of years, but we had updates in between, right? So it wasn't like we had Windows 7 for 3 years and it never got any updates. It did. It got Service Pack 1 and so on. So there still was a way to push out new features, but at the same time, I think the actual quality control was better in the past when they were doing it that way. But now I think you're right. Now they're just relying on insiders to feedback, aren't they? But that's not going to be. That's not necessarily going to be representative of how these updates will affect other people's pieces.
Yeah. I think we got our last question for you.
I know we're getting pressed on time here.
Sad,
I know we
sad
don't.
for me because I love talking.
Yeah, this is your question, Kareem. So I'll let you get to it.
Yeah, we just mentioned just quickly before we got on mic that you use Mac OS as well. You use Windows. I just want to know what kind of software tools you use and how do you go about collecting your research to create your videos?
Okay, I'll try and be quick. We're not going to talk about Windows this time, so I'll be.
Oh, we just lost everyone.
I know.
No, keep listening. It's interesting. I'll give you loads of good websites to go to if you're interested in.
That's good.
Yeah. So basically, the channel for me has always been about Windows and basically education. So just educating about history, Windows development. So I didn't go into it because I was interested necessarily in video editing or making videos. So in that respect, I've always kept things relatively simple. So the first videos that I put on my channel, believe this or not, this is kind of embarrassing. I used Windows Media Maker. Like, that's how simple it was. Then eventually,
y'all started on that.
Yeah, probably. You're probably right. Then eventually, when I did the whole rebrand and went for Windows on Windows in 2014, then I switched to Adobe Premiere Elements, which is what I've used since. And it's basically just a lighter, slimmer version of Premiere Pro. And for me, not being big on video editing, I only need, I need simple tools like, being able to mix the audio and stuff. I don't need special effects or anything fancy. So for me, it's been all I've ever needed. So I've just always used that. So Adobe Premiere Elements is my video editor, and all my editing is very simple still. I mean, I think probably better than it was, but still simple, because I think simple, like I said, simple is effective. So simple. And then for research, there's loads of good websites. So BetaWiki is a big one. If you're into Windows development, they have literally pages on all builds of all versions of Windows, so you can be really specific and just say, I want to go look at Longhorn build 4074, and it'll tell you all about it, what date it was compiled, what new features it has, you'll get screenshots. There's a similar website called the Collection Book, very similar. They have a lot more screenshots, so if you just want to look at the visuals, they've literally got hundreds for every build, and it's fascinating. I could spend all day on the collection. You've got Beta Archive, which is similar again. It does have a wiki, which is similar to BetaWiki. It also has a forum, so if you're interested in interacting with people, you can obviously use the forum there. If you're interested specifically in Windows Longhorn, longhorn.ms is a great website that is all about Longhorn development, which was Windows Vista, for those that don't know. I'm sure people do. And then also, more recently, I'm using Twitter as well, because a lot of people that worked on Windows in the past and present are on Twitter. So people like Jensen Harris, that was one of the developers who worked on Windows 8. He posted tweets about the wallpaper, like the puzzle wallpaper.
Yep.
It was like a word coup puzzle that no one ever worked out. I think one person did work out. But how to solve the puzzle. I've been messaging Daniel Oren on Twitter, who is actually the person that invented the start menu and taskbar. Literally that person. So it's just fascinating. And then obviously books as well, to a lesser degree, but these are still useful, especially some of the books. Like there's this Bill Gates book here that goes into information about Windows 1's development, which is so long ago, isn't it? It's hard to find information, but yeah, a lot of books, especially on older versions of Windows, have information on those as well. So yeah, there's loads of sources out there that I use for research that I would definitely recommend to anyone else that's interested.
Aside from your own site, if you want to plug that, I think people should know about this too.
Yes. From my YouTube channel. Yes. I mean, if you're not big on reading, and personally I'm not big on reading, if you see the juicy bits, then yes, come to the channel. Just go to windowsonwindows.com. All the links are there. Link to the channel, all the socials. We've got a Discord server where you can come and talk to people about Windows. It's great. Love it. I do daily Windows facts on my Twitter. So yes, what more could you want?
I agree. I give it 2 thumbs up because Eric actually put me on in the last week. I think I've knocked out 9 videos or so. Just like it's kind of like my wife goes to bed and I'll turn on YouTube and
Exactly.
just like I'm kind of plugging away at other things, but the videos are on in the background. And I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. I think people also say that they find them relaxing. Like my voice is kind of relaxing. So
very much so.
Have them on the background when they're doing other stuff. And yeah, if that works for you, that's great. I love that. Thank you for the support.
Yeah, I want to say again, thank you. Thank you for sharing some time with us and bringing all of your acumen to this particular podcast today. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to maybe in the future having you back on. We can talk about some more Windows stuff or some more Duo stuff, or just stuff in general. What's happening in the UK? But again, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it very much. Yeah, I'd love to come back. If you ever want me to waffle on about Windows, I'm happy to do that.
Thanks so much, Hugh. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Yeah. I hope everyone enjoyed our guest Hugh today. We learned a lot. Learned a lot about him. We learned a lot about his channel. We learned a lot about Windows. And there's always more. There's always so much more we can learn about Windows. So we look forward to having him on the podcast again. And in the meantime, please go visit his channel to get educated about all the stuff on Windows. Other than that, you can find me at Mindhead1 on Twitter. Where can people find you?
AVAC Jern.
Yeah, and for all the other news, you can visit our Twitter. It's on OnPodcast, on Microsoft.com on Twitter. Again, that's where we kind of host our giveaways, our latest features, editorials, reviews, things like that. Speaking of reviews, I have got some Microsoft hardware.
He has the laptop studio in his hands.
I got the studio and with all its flippiness and whatnot, and I also got the Surface Pro 8 and the Surface Pen 2. So I will be reviewing those. I've already started pitting it against my P15, which is a loud beast. This thing is super quiet. So already it's got 1 in the win column. I'm also reviewing, like I said, I'm finishing up my review for the AR glasses for ThinkPad. ThinkVision, I think, is their brand for that. And I got a new mechanical lo-fi keyboard, which is super cool. It looks like a Mac keyboard, but with a much clickier keys. So if you're into mechanical keyboards, but you want something that looks super stylish, I should have that out pretty soon. How about yourself?
I don't have anything much in particular planned for the next week. You got all the fancy hardware this week. Usually it's me, but this week you have me upstage there.
Well, you got all this stuff like a month ago. I'm just late. I'm here to kind of test this out. I'm going to try and test it out a little thoroughly against like the VivoBook and XPS 15s, and all the other things that are within this category. I've even tried to teach myself Premiere and Resolve just so I can do some of the benchmarks that you people all use. I know normally I use Filmora, but I'm going to try and get all of Photoshop and all of the editors and try and push this thing so it screams and it heats up, and I can tell you whether or not this is a good choice for you.
And for you guys, our viewers who managed to stick around for 1 hour and throughout our full chat with Hugh from Windows on Windows, we have a special treat for you guys. Thanks to our friends at Stardock and who are the new people behind Start11, we have a giveaway for you guys. Start11 is a great way to customize Windows 11 in ways that Microsoft won't let you. You could bring back the old style Windows 10 start menu. You can move your taskbar to the top of the screen. You can make your start screen full screen, just like it was in Windows 10. And for people on Windows 10, you could make Windows 10 look like Windows 11. So it's a very special piece of software, and I know Brad Sams is now working at Stardock, and we hit him up, and he gave us 3 codes for the app. So for our special OnPodcast viewers, we have a link. We'll share it, and we'll pin it in the comments. You could enter our giveaway, and we'll announce the winners on next week's episode.
Yeah, I feel like was it Rainmeter? Was that what it was called? The software that could make Windows look and do all kinds of crazy things. I feel like Stardock's the more polished official version of this. So again, if you were interested in tinkering with your own operating system and making it look and feel the way you want, please try and get one of these codes.
All right, everyone. Thanks, everyone. We hope to see you again soon. Same place, same time.
Have a great weekend. Stay safe, and we'll see each other in person soon.
All right. Bye-bye.